Hi, Eva Nichols here. Welcome to my class. Thanks for signing up. We are going to paint a couple of chickadees today in a winter scene with some red berries, and you'll learn a lot of fun watercolor techniques along the way. I'm going to explain everything step by step, so I would say an absolute beginner might find it a little challenging, but if you are, a little bit more advanced beginner, you've painted a little bit before, this class is perfect for you. And if you are intermediate or more advanced, that works fine too. I'm sure you'll get something out of the class. Without further ado, let's get painting. And first I'm going to go over the materials. As promised, let's go over the materials we're going to be using. We are going to be using a piece of 8 by 10. That's the size I'm painting on. You can paint on whatever size you like. Watercolor paper, and I have a tracing available for you that's in your handouts. I get my inspiration for birds from the John Muir Law's Share Birds, or he also has a couple of other bird guides. I like to go in and take a look here just so I get the marking somewhat right. And I am going for this mountain chickadee, which is a bird we have a lot of up here. You can go for whatever bird you like, and you might have another bird guide that you could take a look at if you wanted to switch it up. And here you can see this is the finished painting that I have printed out on a little greeting card. So it's excellent for, you could use it for Christmas cards or holiday cards, or just, a card with a wintry scene. It doesn't have to be a holiday card. On purpose I made it so that it's not like screaming holidays. The colors we're going to be using today are, for the berries, I'm going to use quinacridone red mainly, and then a French ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, peacock blue, and indigo. And then I'm going to be using some quinacridone gold and some burnt sienna. That's what I'm going to be using, but you do not have to use the same colors as me. There's total and utter, freedom in my class. You can use whatever colors inspire you. And I'm going to be using some brushes. And again, you do not have to have the same brushes as me, just to give you an idea. And so I do use my dagger brush. It's a 1/2-inch dagger brush. That might be the ones, if you are not familiar with this, that could be a little hard to find. Some of the dagger or dagger striper, they're called sometimes, they are too long and floppy for my taste. So I like this model here, and that's discontinued unfortunately, but you can find it online, and I'll have it in a material list. I'm going to be using probably a size 8. A size 8, that's this one. This one's a size 12. I might be using that one. And then I have a size 4 and a size 3 and a size 2 round. And then I have a couple of rigger brushes. Those come in handy for when we're painting the branches. And then I have this little itsy bitsy tiny detail brush. I hardly ever use this, but I dug it out today to give the berries those little black, dots that they have where the flower was attached. And this is a 03. But again, use the brushes you have. Do not feel that you don't have the same brushes as me. You can't paint it. You certainly can. And then for the application of the sky, in this particular painting, I actually happen to use this one. It is number 18, and it's about a 3/4 inch maybe. Natural hair. You might have this set of watercolor brushes. You can see I have a whole bunch from this set that I bought online for right around $30 for 8 brushes. And here you can see 6 of them. And this is a number 30 round, and it holds a lot of water also, and that's also excellent to apply the water for the sky and bigger areas where you need water or paint. You could use an old or cheap small brush to apply masking fluid. I like to use the PBO drawing gum. And if you use a brush, then make sure that you dip it in some soapy water first so that you don't ruin it. But very often I use something like this. It's a shaping tool. It has like this rubber thing on one end, and then it has like a metal dot there. And I often use the metal dot, and especially for those round berries, works really well. And no cleanup. You can also just use the back of a brush. I do that sometimes. Just make sure you don't whatever you do, don't use your good watercolor brushes. So that was masking fluid. And you also need a cut up plastic card, credit card, store card, whatever you have. I like to cut mine out like this, so I have a pointy part, because that's what I'm going to be doing to scrape out some of the texture on the bird's feathers. So make sure you have one of those. You will use a pencil of some sort to transfer your drawing. We're going to use a rubber cement eraser to take off the masking fluid. Might need a kneaded eraser to tone down some of your pencil lines if they got a little dark. I'm going to use some salt for the background, for the sky. You can see here there's a little salt action. And if you don't get quite enough salt action, because that's hit and miss sometimes, you could also use some white paint. I like this one, Aqua Cover liquid watercolor paper from Creative Mark, and this is designed to cover Artist Bright White, but you could also just use some white wash that you have, or white ink, or even white watercolor, whatever you have. I like a spray bottle. I like to have 2 containers of water, one that I rinse my brushes out in, so that's for the dirty water, and then clean water to dilute my colors and mix my color puddles. Why don't you get your supplies together and then we can start painting? And one more thing I can say to you is to transfer the drawing onto your watercolor paper, just tape your drawing up in a window where there's sunlight, or a light window where the light comes in, so during the daytime, and then tape just with a piece of tape on the top your watercolor paper on top of your drawing, and the drawing will show through the watercolor paper and you can trace it with a pencil. Don't put too much pressure on the pencil. And if you don't like that method, if you have a light table, you can use that, or you can also use transfer paper or graphite paper, but it has to be graphite paper with no oil or wax, otherwise the lines will get very dark and you will not be able to get rid of them because there's wax on them, so you don't want to do that. The other thing you could do is take a dark pencil and just put some graphite on the back of your drawing, and then take the drawing on top of your paper and then trace it. Those are the methods that I use. I have a light table in my studio, so I use that, but I've certainly used all the other methods. So get your drawing onto your paper and then we'll start painting. Oh, one other thing I should say to you that you also want to do is just mask out the red berries with some masking fluid, because we don't want to have to paint around them. We're not going to mask out the birds, but we are going to give the birds a little dot of masking fluid inside the eye, so that we have a little white paper and a little white glint of the eye when we paint them. And that's it. That's all for the prep, and I'll see you in a minute. So after I transferred my drawing onto my watercolor paper, which is Arches, I have 300 pound, but if you have 140, that's perfect. And I just did it with pencil, and I did it a little bit darker than I would suggest that you do, just because I'm doing a demo and I want you to be able to see my lines. You don't have to have them that prominent. I would suggest you actually use your kneaded eraser and just kind of roll over some of your lines and pick up some of that extra graphite. After I transferred the drawing, I put on masking fluid. Can you see? I put a little dot inside the eye of each of the birds, and then on the red berries. The rest is not going to be masked out. The branches are going to be darker. I'm going to do a light wet in wet background, and I'm going to try and avoid the birds, but if I get a little bit of the background color into the birds, I can just dab it off with a piece of tissue, and it's not a big deal. Plus, a lot of the birds are going to be quite a bit darker than the background, so it's no issue. So the way I transfer, either, if you have a light tablet, that's the easiest. If you don't, use one of your windows, preferably where the sun is coming in or where the most light is coming in, and tape your drawing up into the window, and then tape your paper on top of your drawing, and then the light will shine through and you can see it perfectly. So that's nature's light table. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to decide on my background color, and it's going to be some sort of a blue. So the blues that I'm going to use is I'm going to use some cobalt blue. Just going to put it out here. So I sprayed my color with a little bit of water, and then make sure you have enough. Of course, it's a fairly big area, even though we want it light. Let's not be too stingy with this. So there's the blue, and make sure, see, like here now I got a piece of gunk on my brush here. So this is the kind of stuff that you want to avoid getting on your paper. So that's why this mushing around, making sure that your pigment is dissolved completely in the water, is so important. And when you go across like this, it also gives you a good feeling of how much water to liquid you have. So that means how diluted or how concentrated your color is. I think I got rid of it. Good. And then I'm just going to take my spray bottle and then spray a little bit right here in the bristles. Of course, I want it to be a fairly watery mix, and then I might as well get all the pigment out of here. And then I'm going to rinse it. And I have 2 containers of water, and I'm going to use one for rinsing out my brush. And then I have my tissue here out on the side. I don't know if you can see it. It's there. Tissue, paper towel on top of my terry cloth. That's how I have my setup. You can do whatever you like.
So I don't know if you saw that, but you know, I have a terry cloth and some paper towel on top, and then I use my Kleenex to dab out and clean out my wells when they're dirty. So that's how I have it, and I'm left-handed, so I have it all on my left side. If you're right-handed, you would want to have it on the right side. All right, so let's grab another blue. I always like to have more than one blue color. And the other one I'm going to grab is peacock blue. It's more of a turquoisey blue. I'm just going to put it here next to see how it is more turquoisey blue than the cobalt. And you can also see this one moves into the cobalt. So this moves more than the cobalt. You see how it's moving in? It's not the cobalt moving into the peacock. And if you don't have peacock, that's a Holbein color, and I just like it. And I used to use phthalo blue, green shade, on my palette, but it's a very dominant color. It's a little bit darker than this one, but same kind of color family, so to speak, a cool blue. But since I do a lot of teaching, phthalo blue is really not that easy to deal with if you're a beginner, because it just is so dominant. Now the peacock blue here is also, you know, it's a staining color. It also, as you can see, moves into the cobalt blue, but it's a little bit more forgiving. And now you can see my water, beautiful color, so I'm happy with that. Now I live, you know, where we have a lot of blue skies, thank the Lord for that, and that's how I'm gonna have my sky. Now you might want to tone yours down a little bit, and I actually have some dark colors here left over. There's indigo in it, and there's burnt sienna in these puddles here, and when I get down to the bottom, I might put a little bit of that in to tone down the blue. That's a possibility. I haven't made up my mind yet. And now I'm going to take clean water and I'm going to put it all the places where I want the sky. So I'm going to try and not put too much water in the birds if I can help it. I'm going to try and go around them actually. But again, don't panic if you get a little bit of color in the birds. Of course, first of all, you can dab it off. And second of all, they're going to be darker, much darker than the background. So it's not a big deal. And I'm definitely not going to worry about the branches because they are going to be a lot darker. So I'm just trying to be a little careful here, going around the birdies and then just straight over the branches and the berries. And the berries I masked out, as you know. So, and I want the paper quite wet so that the colors will flow, and I have a little time to get them on my paper here before it starts drying. Once it starts drying, you really want to get out and not keep working on your background, because then you're going to start getting runbacks and brush strokes, and you want the background to be nice and smooth and nothing, you know, no hard lines and no pencil marks if we can avoid it and stuff. And one thing you could do, and I don't know if I'm going to do it, but we'll see what I get inspired to do. I almost always have a very loose idea of what I want to do, and you know, I allow myself the creative freedom to change my mind as I'm in the middle of the painting, as far as, you know, if I want to put salt on or, you know, what I want to do. All right, so let's get some of this, and I'm just again using this is a 1-inch natural hairbrush, so it holds a ton of water. I don't use it very often, which is a pity because I paid a pretty fortune for it. But anyway, so I'm going to put a little bit down here and around here, just kind of combine the colors on both sides of the birds and this. And because it's wet, you know, it's going to mix and mingle. And again, I want to remind you that I don't want it too dark. Just a light background. Put a little bit more of the cobalt in here on this side, bottom. All right, I think, and I don't mind if I have a little bit of light in there. That could be very, very nice. And the only thing I want to do is I want to make sure I don't have like a halo or something like that around the birds. So I would like to go up to the pencil lines as much as possible. And again, if you go into the birds, don't worry about it. I like what I have here. I think this is good. And then remember I said I might take a little bit of the dirt down here, bluish dirt, and I might just go in and put it. You can see how that's kind of a little bit more muted. Go in and do a little bit like that. All right, so far so good. I really like what I have here. So I'm gonna let it settle in a little bit. Can you see, even though it's 300 pound I'm painting on, it kind of curves up a little bit because, you know, now the front of the paper is all wet and the back is still dry. And I'm just gonna clean out my brush, and I'm still debating on the salt. The salt, you want to put it in while it's still shiny but not dripping wet. So I still have a moment or two to kind of think about it. And right now I'm just gonna take a clean tissue and just wipe a little bit here. And I can also, if you feel that your colors are not mixing and mingling enough, you can just kind of very gently rock it back and forth, get the colors to mix and mingle. Mine are doing pretty well because I had it so wet. The wetter you have it, your paper, water, the more you're diluting the colors, of course. So this is going to dry quite a bit lighter than what it looks like right now. And second of all, it's going to run much further and mingle and be uncontrollable, basically. The more water you have, the more it runs, wider it spreads, the less control you have. That is kind of like the rule of thumb here. And I always make sure that I don't have any pigment kind of gathering here at these rougher edges, because they can sometimes, when you're not looking, run back in and create a bloom right on your edge. If that's ever happened to you, that's because of the pigment kind of gathering in some of those little rougher areas here around the edges. And then, you know, as the paper is drying, then all of a sudden they start creeping in. Quite annoying. So there we have that, and I think I might, should I do it? Still kind of, yeah, I think I will put a little bit of salt on, not too much. And this would be the right time. It's still shiny, but it's not like super shiny. And I'm just gonna put in a little bit. I do want it to look wintry, and salt is definitely a good way of getting that effect. And then what I'm gonna do is I wanna have some very faint, or somewhat faint, little pine boughs, I don't know how you say that, in the background. And that's actually where I can use some of this dark that I have. And it's indigo, and I am taking a rigger brush, just a little brush here. So I have indigo with a little bit of burnt sienna. Let me get some burnt sienna also. And that creates like a really nice, rich, dark green, kind of subdued. And that's what I want. So since I just finished painting another painting where I painted a bunch of evergreens. When I have mixes like that are still good, and I knew I was going to paint this painting, I thought I'd just leave it, even though I do like to have a clean palette most of the time.
So I forgot to turn the camera on in the beginning of when I painted in those little pine branches. So I wanted to just do a little demo just so that you didn't feel that you didn't get the full instruction on that. So I'm using a little bit of a slightly dirtied down burnt sienna, and I'm using my rigger brush, and I'm just doing a flick of the wrist like that. And then I'm not even going to rinse out my brush. I'm going in here into some dark blue, indigo, and burnt sienna, or you could also just use the other blues that you already had. Doesn't matter so much. And then I'm going to put in, that was too brown. I'm going to put in, oops, that's a little too much. It's a little wet. The wetter it is, the more it flows out, it becomes paler. So just a little flick of the wrist from the little branch there. And here, these guys flow out quite a bit. And you'll see when I paint on the other side, on the real painting, it's dried in the meantime, and it won't flow out as much. And always remember to turn your paper so it's as easy as possible for you to make the brush strokes you need. But there you have it. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm doing the same over here in this corner, and I gotta be fast because can you see how these lines are holding more now? That is because the paper is beginning to dry more. And so if you want to do this, you got to do it right away, so to speak. But you got to wait for the paper to dry a little bit, otherwise everything is going to fuzz out completely. Can you see the difference how fuzzy those are? And these here are not quite as fuzzy, but that's fine. That just says that these are a little bit closer to us maybe, and these are a little bit further away, and that's fine. That's totally fine. And let's see, might just do a little branch, like a side branch like that. And again, I'm adding water because also the paints in my puddles, they're also drying. And then let's get just a little bit like this, and we have some coming in here from another branch. I think we can just do like that. And I just want to get some of this in before things dry on me. There, I think we're good. Like that. I think that's nice. They're different, but still related, and that's what we want. So I'm gonna let this all dry now, and then we will paint in the birds, and then we'll add on the branches. And if we want and need more of these here later, we can totally do it. So there's no need to panic. This is a good beginning, I feel, and I do like that little wispy thing going on. Everything has dried. I rubbed the salt off gently, and I got a little bit of texture, not too much. I like that. because, you know, we have the branches and the berries and the birdies, and we have these little pine twigs kind of into the picture. And then we want to get started on the birds. And I often use my wonderful bird book. This one is the Sierra Birds, A Hiker's Guide, and it's by John Muir Laws. And he is a wonderful, wonderful naturalist. And he also does, you know, watercolors and illustrations for the bird guides. And he also does flowers and plant guides and stuff like that. And so this is the chickadee, the mountain chickadee that I want to paint. So it has a little bit of black that goes through the eye, and then it has white, it has black down here, has a dark beak, and it's basically grayish colors. So that's what I'm going for. But you could choose a different chickadee if you wanted to, wherever you live and whatever chickadees you have. There's the chestnut backed. That's what I used to have when I was living down in the Monterey Peninsula. But up here in the mountains we have this one, and there's also the black capped. And then of course if you live in Europe, you have all sorts of chickadees also, musvita and blåmejser in Danish, that you could paint. You could also paint a different kind of bird. You know, whatever you want to do. But this is what I'm going for. So I already got my puddles out. I am now adding some French ultramarine blue. I have a couple of puddles of the burnt sienna, and I have my cobalt blue. So I'm just gonna mix myself a little bit of a grayish color, and so that's gonna be with some of the burnt sienna, and I'm gonna put some of the cobalt blue in, and that should give me a gray. And I can also put a little bit of the French ultramarine blue in. That would also give a gray. So different kinds of grays. So there's a nice gray, and I'm just gonna rinse out my brush. Then I'm gonna put some water in my little birdie here. I'm gonna start with the tummy, and I'm just gonna put a little bit of water in here, and that's very light gray. So I'm just gonna dip the tip of my brush in here, and you can see the gray will kind of spread out, and that's almost a little bit too dark. So I'm adding on some more water and just putting that on like this. And I like it to be a little muddled, so I'm gonna just try and do a little bit like this, and I think that'll be fine. And you know how it is in watercolor, everything dries lighter, so we're good. Maybe you want to darken it just a little bit here, just because it's away from the light underneath on the little belly here. There, I think that's going to be good. And let's just do the same on this one over here. Just a little bit of a different angle, but some water in. The brush I'm using is a number 8 round. Doesn't have the best tip, been probably abused by yours truly, but that's okay. And just the same idea, just a little bit of color in, a little bit darker there, maybe not that dark, but then you can see I'm just take some of the moisture out. That was a little much. Just getting that gray in, and because both the burnt sienna, French ultramarine blue in particular, and the cobalt blue, they're all granulating color, so that will give us a little bit of granulation, which is perfect. You know, they're all puffed up because it's cold. That's why they look fat. It's just because they have puffed up their feathers. And let's go down here on this little leggy. There, I think this is good. We'll let that dry. So I just dabbled in some of my mixed gray in the body of both birds, and because the French ultramarine blue and cobalt blue and burnt sienna, they're all granulating colors, I'll get some nice granulation that's going to indicate the feathers. And while this one's still drying, I can pick out a little bit. If I think it got maybe a little dark, I can pick up a little bit of the pigment here. But just run that in, wet into wet, and you know, you get a little bit of, you know, you saw I dabbled in a little bit, so you get a little bit of a mottled effect. Okay, now that our birds' little tummies have dried, let's go in and put this part. I don't know exactly what it's called. I would have to, check John Muir's book. So I'm darkening up the gray a little bit, and I should put a little bit of water in, and so it goes kind of like this. They're kind of like they cover, they're the feathers that cover on top of, the longer wing feathers, and then it goes around. There's black and there's white here, white area. So we want to make sure that we get kind of like a nice feathery looking little texture. Don't want it too dark because they're not really that dark. So just like this. And I think I'll run in some more water just to get it lightened up a little bit. And I'm just carefully kind of trying to get a little feathery looking edges here, because some of it is the white and the rest, and some of it is black that it's running up against. As you can see here, it's that area there that we're painting, and you can see it's a little darker than the tummy. See here, just like that. a little bit. I think this is pretty good. There's a little bit of that going on the other bird also, but in a little bit of a different fashion. I'm going to put a little bit of water in here and then here, and I like the color I had there, so let's see, like here. And then again, some water in. Just the water, adding the water also really helps with, and then here's, it's going up on that white area. When you add the water, you are kind of encouraging the granulation, which I really would like to do here because I think that's going to help like that. Okay, I think that's pretty good. You can see there's quite a bit of white area that goes up there. The next thing we could do is, while we're at it, we could do the little tails. So why don't we do that? And I'm just going to put a little bit of water in the direction of the feathers. I have a little area here where I got the blue in where it wasn't supposed to go. That's okay. And then I'm going to put some of that gray color on, the darker gray that I just used there. And you can see some places it hits the water and fusses out, and other places it hits the dry. And so I get a little bit harder edges, and that's exactly what I want. I think I want a little bit more, maybe burnt sienna in there. Warm it up a little bit some places. And that was maybe a little more than what I wanted, but that's okay. We can make them a little bit more colorful if we want to. It's our birds, so we can do what we want. There, I think that's pretty good. I'll rinse it out, and then I'm just going to go in and soften out a little bit. Don't want too much white sparkle here, but a little bit, I don't mind. Like that. And I might even grab my credit card just to get a little bit of lines, not too much. There, and we'll see how that pans out. And we can do the other little tail also. And here I'm going to flip it around so I don't have my hand over the area so you can't see what I'm doing. And again, I'm putting in a little bit of water in the direction of the feathers, but not wetting the whole tail. And then I go in with a little, this is a number 4 brush I have here, and I have a very light touch. And again, I just kind of go in the direction of the tail feathers. Let's vary the color a little bit here too, and do some little strokes in the direction of the feathers. And some of my strokes hit the area that I put water on, and some strokes are going to hit the area where I left it dry. So there's not very much water on, because then everything would run together, and I didn't really want that. And it goes around these wing feathers. So there, I think I'll do the same. Take my credit card, and I'm using the pointy part, this part here, and just scraping in a little bit in the direction of the tail feathers. I might have a little bit too much white right there. I put a little bit of water in, just kind of dilute it a little bit. There. I'm going to leave it like that for now. We can always fine tune. And these colors that I'm using, the French ultramarine blue, the burnt sienna, and the cobalt blue, they lift very easily. So they're granulating and they lift easily. So if I find out when I'm all done that I feel that some of the areas got a little too dark, I can easily lift up. So that's good to know. So far so good. I do like to take my kneaded eraser, and once the areas are dry, I just kind of dab on it a little bit to try and remove some of the pencil lines. I did mine a little bit darker so you guys could see. Normally I don't like to have dark pencil lines in my watercolors. So the next thing we're going to do is let's do the wings. And so here is actually a little bit of an area that's a little bit darker right here. So it's kind of in between the two wings. Put that in. Just dab in a little color here, just like that. And then let's do these wings here, and they have a little bit of a white edge on them, so we want to try and get that in if we can. So I'm gonna these wing feathers, so I'm doing it wet on dry, a little bit of the darker gray, and then let's get this area a little fussed out. And let's take a brush that has a little bit of a better tip here, and there's a little bit of wing here on the other side here, so I'm doing it like this, and it comes like that, just like that. And let's see if we can continue here. And I don't want very much white, just a little hint. Mainly here on the tip of those feathers that you see that little bit of white edge. And there, it's pretty okay. And we can go in and give them a little bit more texture later. Don't want that white there. And then let's go in and see if we can kind of fuss that edge a little bit. And I think I'll go in with my credit card again to get some of that direction of those wing feathers and get a little bit more kind of texture on them, like that. I think that's pretty good. Again, we have to remember, this is not for the Audubon Society. This is just, you know, a nice little Christmas card with some little chickadees. So we shouldn't get too compulsive about it. And so here you can actually see a little bit of a feather that's kind of lying at a different angle because it's from the opposite side of the wing. And so I gave it a little rip, and then I'm doing a little bit like that. And then the other ones we have here, they're pretty much the same as on the other side. So we're just gonna paint them in, and it has a little bit like that. And then we'll see if we can leave a tiny bit of white like that. And you know what? If you miss the white, don't worry about it, because you know, we can always go in with a gel pen afterwards if we need to. Nobody says that, you know, it has to be perfect here. And we'll do one more like that, and a little too much on there. And then I want darker, so I need to strengthen my puddle here a little bit and make sure I don't have too much pigment on, so because that way I can't control it. And I'm just going in and darkening right here and see if I can get another little white there. And then there's another little feather here, a little darker. Too much white here. Let's get rid of that, just like that. And again, let's go in with our credit card pointy side, and let's do some of these little lines in the direction of the feathers to make it look, or of the wings and the feathers on the wings, to make it look more like feathers. Just soften here a little bit. And then we have the feathers from the other side, and they're kind of lying, you know, in this direction. So we already had that little feather that where we could kind of see the rib of the feather there. And then they go in kind of like that. And let's get them a little bit darker in here and see there's kind of that. Can you see like that direction? They're kind of going over. And I think actually this one should be a little bit longer. That's okay, we do it like this. And then these here go in like this. And then there's, and we don't want them, you know, to look white here, but just lighter. This and a little bit more. And then it's kind of would be dark right there. And we'll have the little tail. Let's see a little bit. And then a little bit more of the, now the feathers are going more like this. And let's get a little bit of a darker in there again. Just get the direction correct first, and then we can always worry about the rest. There we go. And again, let's take the credit card and get some of these shapes emphasized like that. There. Yeah, for now it's good. And then let's go in, and we need to create a black. So let's take some of our French ultramarine blue and put it over here into our thicker burnt sienna. A little bit more. And we can even take a little bit of that blue from the sky and put in a little bit more French ultramarine blue until I get a kind of a black color that I like. There. I think I like this one. Okay, so these little guys, they are black here. And you'll see once we get that black on, that's really gonna help a lot. Like that. And they're black here on the top of their heads. And again, if we can get a little bit of an uneven line where it meets the white, that would be great. And I'm going to just put a little bit of water on the tip. And I don't even mind if I get it a little bluer right up here. And then it goes down, and then it goes like this. And then it goes like this. It's a little bit of black. Here it goes right to the eye. And just get some little, I'm using little tiny strokes to indicate those feathers and at the edges. And it goes kind of like that. There we go. I'm pretty good with that. I like that one. It does go a little bit further up like this, I think. At least it does on mine. And again, you know, don't be too obsessed about, you know, it having to be 100% accurate. Close enough. And they all look a little different. I have a ton of them out on my bird feeders, and they all are a little different if you look a little bit closer. So there's that little bird, and now it's already looking a lot more like a chickadee, and once we get the eye and the beak on, you know, we're on the home stretch. So let's do the other one, and we'll start again around the little chin, and I'm gonna switch my painting upside down so that I don't get my hand in wet paint and hold over so you can't see what I'm doing. So they can go down a little bit more like that, and the feathers go down there, and then they go along here. There. So that's that. I'll take a look. I'm gonna go and switch over to my right hand. I can do that. Oops. Didn't really want that. There. Just pick that up. And I'm gonna just get the direction a little bit, just like that. And then there's black feathers here on the top of the head. And let's see if we can get a little bit of an uneven edge there. It's a little bit of white, and then there's the black that goes again in like around the eye, like that. A little bit like that. And I need to darken here. That's pretty good. Just see if I can ruffle up that edge a little bit more. Same here, like that. There. All right, that's dry. I did my little, very carefully so that I don't take the masking off around the eyes. Just dabbed out a little bit of the pencil lines in the white area. And I don't think I'm gonna leave the white area completely white like that. And the dark black there is also too dark, I think. But I have to remind myself and you that all those little tweaks, they come later. Let's just get the whole little birdie painted, and then we can see where we need to tweak. That's really how it goes. So with that in mind, let's get the little beaks on here. So I put a little bit of water inside, and then I put a little bit of that gray black in, and just give it the little beak first, like that. And do the same on the other one here. I can do it wet on dry, it doesn't matter. And there we have it. And I'm just gonna lift out a little bit there, maybe also a little bit right there. And I'm going to let it dry for now because we need to put a little bit more detail on it. I'm not going to worry about the little feet because I'm going to do those when we paint the branches. I can go in while I wait for the beak to dry, just kind of with a wet brush, and just go in and just do some strokes with the water here. Just put a little bit more, I'm hoping, dimension in this very dark area, black area. And soften some of the edges just a little tiny bit, and you might not have to do this, just like that. And also underneath here is very kind of solid down here. I don't really like that. And again, just see if I can just give it a little bit more look of a texture. That's what I'm after. And again, you don't have to do this. This is already fiddling a little bit, but all right. Let's see. I think our little beaks are maybe dry enough so we can put in, and it's a little darker underneath here, so that's what I'm putting in. And the same here, a little darker underneath that. There. Can you see that already looks a lot better? And then you want to wait and make sure that everything's completely dry, and then let's get the masking fluid out of the eye, and then we're going to paint the little eyes, and that's going to make the big difference.